After dispatching the Orlando Magic in what came to be a massively competitive 7-game series that saw the momentum shift more than a few times, the Cleveland Cavaliers find themselves staring at a second-round matchup with the juggernaut that is the Boston Celtics, the team that frankly nobody wants to see in a 7-game series. They are one of the deepest teams in basketball, if not the deepest team outright. They are the NBA's highest rated offensive unit and have its second best defensive rating, and by virtue of these, they have the NBA's highest net rating by a pretty wide margin with a net rating of 11.7. Boston is coming off a gentleman's sweep of the Miami Heat, a series that saw them dominate on both ends of the floor. It wasn't without its cost though, as Boston may be without Kristaps Porzingis for possibly the second round as he suffered a calf injury in Game 4, a soleus strain. Meanwhile, Cleveland has also been hit with a pretty big injury lately as well in Jarrett Allen, who has missed the last 3 games due to a rib injury. This is in addition to Dean Wade, who has been missing for quite some time now. They've also dealt with a middling offense that can struggle at times to keep up with other teams, but still features a few players fully capable of getting hot and changing the complexion of a game. They may not be world beaters offensively by any means, but they do feature the league's 7th best defensive unit, boasting a defensive rating of 112.1. They get the job done more often than not on that end. And if you need proof of that, look no further than their first round date with the Orlando Magic, in which they failed to score over 100 points in 5 out of these 7 games and struggled to knock down shots from the perimeter, completing just 60 of 209 attempts. That's 28.7%, which is the second worst among playoff teams. Despite that, they ended up winning the series. And quite honestly, this series could have a much different feel than the prior did. That is because not many truly expected Orlando to walk away victorious in round 1. Cleveland was the team with much more pressure on them, so anything less than a win would have been deemed unacceptable in the eyes of just about every fan. In this series, however, no one will be expecting the Cavaliers to pull off the upset outside of possibly Cleveland. They will enter as a massive underdog, and to be honest, I kind of understand why. The tail of the tape. The Boston Celtics and Cleveland Cavaliers get the job done in various ways. As I mentioned in my breakdown for the previous series, Cleveland has become a lot more balanced on the offensive side of the ball after relying heavily upon scoring the bulk of their points in the painted area in each of the past 5 seasons. The Cavaliers have switched things up in a big way, now having the most balanced offense that they have had since the second post-LeBron era began. They finished the 2023-24 regular season, scoring 44.5% of their points in the paint. That ranked 13th in the NBA, their first time outside of the top 10 since the 2018-19 campaign. In fact, they are scoring just 50.2% of their total points on 2-point field goals. That ranks 20th. However, the biggest change has been their newfound ability to space the floor. A substantial 36% of their points are coming via the 3-point shot. That is good enough for 7th league-wide. And while they may be middle of the pack in terms of efficiency, making 36.7% of those, they're knocking down the NBA's 7th most triples per game at 13.5 trays per contest. It is clear that they value the triple, and rightfully so. All of that being said, this is an offense that ranks 20th at just 112.6 points per game. They are not offensive juggernauts, they have just changed their offensive philosophy. The Celtics, fresh off of one of the best regular seasons in NBA history, entered the 2023-24 playoffs as the clear favorite to reach the NBA Finals out of the Eastern Conference. These guys ranked in the top 2 on both ends of the floor and had the 5th best point differential in NBA history. They have few weaknesses. A deeper look at how they operate offensively shows you that they are very perimeter-centric, scoring just 47 of their 120.6 points per game from within the painted area. That's less than 39%, which places them dead last in that category. They aren't much of a mid-range threat either, securing only 6.5% of their points off of mid-range looks this year. That ranks 21st. Boston knows where its true strength lies, and that's on the outside, where they feature a litany of highly efficient shooters. They graded as the NBA's top marksman during the regular season, finishing with an average of 16.5 3-pointers per game, which led by a margin of 1.7. They took the most triples per game with 42.5 attempts per contest. No one even really came close in either area. On top of that, they were ridiculously efficient with these looks as they finished the campaign with a team 3-point percentage of 38.8%, which placed them second. Yes sir, the 3-point shot is king in Beantown, as 41% of their team's total points come from the perimeter shot, which unsurprisingly led the NBA by a substantial margin. The Golden State Warriors were a distant second at 37.6% in that regard. Keys to victory: defend the 3-point line. Considering everything I just mentioned, this one should come as a surprise to absolutely no one. To those who have watched the Boston Celtics play at all this season, one thing should be very clear by now. The Celtics live and die by the three-point shot. It is their bread and butter, and nearly everyone within their rotation gets in on the action. To further elaborate on that, 8 Celtics players have made at least 100 triples this season. 3 of those 8 have made over 190. Jason Tatum, Sam Hauser, and Derek White. No other team in the NBA can say that. Now I want you to think about that. Cleveland's leader in three-point makes this season was unsurprisingly Donovan Mitchell, who finished with 182, which ranked 34th in the NBA. So basically, any one of those 3 would have led Cleveland in this category in 2023-24. That is astounding in my opinion. Now it's one thing to make a bunch of triples. It's another to be efficient while doing so. What makes Boston especially difficult to deal with is that they feature so many accurate marksmen. You cannot hone in on any particular matchup in this regard and feel comfortable letting someone else shoot. 3 of those aforementioned 8 players shot above 40% from three-point distance this season. Jrue Holiday, Al Horford, and the previously mentioned Hauser. They are snipers of the highest order, and they can and will make you pay for it if you leave them too much space. The worst part about this is the simple fact that they have the ability to shoot at nearly every possible position, from point guard to center. They can drop bombs on you without so much as a flick of the wrist. And it can come from anywhere on the court, both in a literal and positional sense. They can operate 5 out, which in turn can pull opposing teams' bigs out of the paint, which leaves them scrambling to defend the perimeter. It's a very tough thing to defend because your bigs have to have a certain level of switchiness to them. Enter the Cleveland Cavaliers, who feature 2 bigs in Evan Mobley and Jarrett Allen, who are fully capable of providing just that. Respectable defense from beyond the three-point line. Allen has a defensive field goal percentage from beyond the arc of 33.2%, meaning he held his matchups to 33.2% when acting as the primary or closest defender when an opponent attempted a triple. That places him in line with Bam Adebayo, one of the best examples of the switchy big in today's NBA. He's damn good at stepping out on the perimeter. Ditto for Evan Mobley, who didn't quite fare as well this year due to the myriad injuries he dealt with this season. He held his matchups to 37% from range when stepping out onto the perimeter or acting as the closest defender. I have confidence that they could hold their own if needed. The problem is, the team as a whole didn't fare too well in this regard this season, at least in a statistical sense. Cleveland ranked 20th out of the 30 NBA teams in defensive field goal percentage from beyond the arc, holding their opponents to a collective 37.1% from distance this season. It's been somewhat of an Achilles heel for a few years now. For as good as this Cavaliers team has been at defending the rim and painted areas, they have struggled at times to defend the three-point line. Now I have both good news and bad news in this respect. Let's start with the good news. The good news, I suppose, is that teams don't attempt a particularly high amount of triples against Cleveland. Opponents are only attempting 33.8 triples per game against them, which is the 8th fewest in the NBA this season and far below the league average of 35.1. The bad news, however, is that just hasn't seemed to matter at all that much in regards to the Celtics. In the 3 regular season matchups against Cleveland, Boston attempted an average of 39.3 triples per game, and they have completed a very efficient 39% of these looks. They have hit no less than 13 triples each time they have faced the Cavs this season on no fewer than 36 total attempts. They get these shots up. It is their bread and butter. The most sickening part is that of the 118 total attempts during this 3-game sample size, 58 were deemed what the NBA considers open, while 48 were considered to be wide open, of which they knocked down 37.9% and 43.8% of respectively. Moral of the story, Cleveland gave up way too many open looks. They generate these looks in numerous ways, as they are the only team in the NBA to rank top 5 in 3-point percentage from the left corner, right corner, and from above the break. They took the bulk of these shots from above the break, as 33 of their 42.5 3-point attempts are of that variety. However, it's not hard to notice just how proficient they have been this season at the corner 3, where they led the league in percentage at 43.1%. If the Cavs are going to defeat the big bad in the East that is Boston, they will have to run Boston off of that 3-point line. This ability to drill the 3-ball is what makes the Boston-Cleveland matchup such a contrast from the Orlando-Cleveland series. Boston is the NBA's best and most dangerous team at shooting the basketball, and the frequency with which they do so is staggering. Orlando is one of the NBA's worst in this respect. They operate mostly within the arc and could be beaten with a heavily paint-focused defensive strategy, emphasizing cutting off driving lanes and forcing them to beat you from the perimeter. Cleveland would need to completely reverse the defensive strategy in order to have a shot at winning this, as they play 5 out. That's a tall order. Maybe we see the Cavs deploy a zone similar to what Miami has done over the past 2 seasons in order to help combat this. Limit turnovers. One of the biggest things this Cleveland team has struggled with at points is turning the ball over. Everyone has been guilty, some more than others. While the Celtics, who ranked a lowly 24th in the NBA in points off turnovers at 15.5 during the course of the regular season, aren't nearly as adept at capitalizing off of their opponent's miscues as the Orlando Magic are, they are still a very dangerous offense that does not need to be given any additional opportunities or additional possessions. You cannot turn the ball over against this Celtics team and expect for the results to favor you. Since the playoffs have begun, they have turned their opponents' mistakes into 16.2 points per game, 5th most in the field of 16 playoff participants. Turning the ball over against them has really started to feel like handing them free points. Conversely, Cleveland is also very good at turning their opponents' giveaways into points, scoring 16.6 points, which happens to rank 12th. The problem is, the Cavs turn the ball over a fairly high amount as well, roughly 13.6 per game. That number has risen pretty drastically since the postseason began, as they are now up to 14.7, second most behind the recently eliminated New Orleans Pelicans. That's not great. See, Boston doesn't make many mistakes. They turn the ball over the fewest times of any team in the league during the regular season, with just 11.9 turnovers per outing, and are only handing the ball over 11.2 times per game so far during the playoffs. Cleveland must take care of the ball. It's a must in this series. Win the battle of the boards. This will always be an area that Cleveland must strive to make a priority. I do not care. We all know that they struggled mightily during last season's series against the Knicks, with a spotlight being shown upon their inability to pull down defensive rebounds, especially after great defensive stops. It proved to be a major nail in the coffin for the 2022-2023 Cavs, as it kicked off many offseason narratives surrounding both Jarrett Allen and Evan Mobley, mostly revolve around them being soft. And to their credit, each turned in great seasons as rebounders, with Mobley averaging a career-high 9.4 boards and Allen pulling down double-digit rebounds over the course of the season, as well as dominating the glass so far through the first round. In fact, Allen's 13.8 boards ranks 3rd behind perennial MVP candidate Nikola Jokic and the ever-present Anthony Davis throughout the 2023-24 playoffs. He has made it a point to prove the doubters wrong. In other words, the lights haven't been too bright for him yet. The issue is that Cleveland isn't necessarily faring too well as a team so far through the first round in this area. After winning the war on the glass during the first 2 games of the Orlando series, the Cavs were out-rebounded in each of the final 5 games. They are pulling down just 41.1 rebounds per game thus far, 13th among the 16 playoff participants, just ahead of the recently eliminated Miami Heat and Phoenix Suns. That's not a place you want to be in. Cleveland has to keep Boston off the glass in this matchup. They lost the rebounding battle in each of the 3 regular season matchups by pretty wide margins, and it's a big reason why they lost the season series in my opinion. There is no singular threat among Boston's deep roster in this regard. Their leading rebounder is Jason Tatum, who averages just 8.1 boards per contest. That said, Cleveland is well aware of just how much rebounding can affect the outcome of a series and needs to do everything within its power to prioritize it. Turn up the heat. This is another no-brainer. As simple as it sounds, the Cleveland Cavaliers have got to make their shots, especially from 3-point distance. This is something that they have now struggled with for the large part in back-to-back postseasons. The team as a whole shot a combined 44.9% from the field, including 32.7% from beyond the arc last season against the Knicks. This year, they are making just 28.7% of their attempts. Not only that, they must take more. They are attempting just 29.9 so far through 7 games during the 2023-24 playoffs. Now, I'll admit, much of this is skewed by the dreadful Game 4 performance they had in which they took just 17 threes, but still, 29.9 for the playoffs overall is 6.8 fewer than their regular season total. Everyone, with the exception of maybe Darius Garland, who is shooting 40%, has struggled to knock down shots in this regard. Donovan Mitchell is 13 of 52, or rather 25%. Caris LeVert is 4 of 17, Evan Mobley is 3 of 11, Isaac Okoro is 4 of 13, Max Strus is 12 of 38, and perhaps most glaringly, Georges Niang has gone 2 of 15. That's 13.3%, my friends. Struggling is probably putting it nicely. Things were supposed to be much different. After all, the Cavs now feature more than a few reliable shot makers outside of their stars in the backcourt. For starters, they acquired swingman Max Strus from Miami, George Niang, who had come off of 5 straight seasons of shooting 40% or better from 3-point distance. This is also in addition to Sam Merrill breaking out and becoming one of the NBA's best shooters, Isaac Okoro experiencing his best season yet, and more. But so far, none of these additions or new developments have yielded results on the big stage just yet. If Cleveland is to stand a real chance at winning this second round series, they must start knocking down some damn shots. If not, they will not be able to keep pace with the high-powered Celtics offense. Through their 7-game series against Orlando, 157 of the Cavs' 209 total 3-point attempts were considered to be open or wide open. And for those of you unfamiliar with what that means, it's basically any shot where a defender is 4 to 6 feet away from the shot taker in the case of open, and any shot where a defender is 6 or more feet away in the case of wide open. Moral of the story, the Cavs have had some makeable looks. They just start knocking them down. Matchups to keep an eye on. Playoff basketball can be heavily matchup driven, right down to the individual matchups between two opposing rotations. Over the course of this series, there will be a few matchups that will be worth keeping an eye on. Some of them may prove more instrumental to victory than others. So with that being the case, here are 3 matchups that could decide the fate of this second round series. Number 1, Evan Mobley versus Jason Tatum. Jason Tatum will not see just one individual defender. He is the type of talent that will require double teams, blitzes, and more. In fact, Evan Mobley has not spent a ton of time defending Tatum this season. NBA.com's tracking data has logged it at 3 individual field goal attempts, of which he has gone 2 of 3 against him. In the previous series, Mobley gave Paolo Banchero problems with his length and ability to step out onto the perimeter when necessary. He contained Banchero. Jason Tatum, on the other hand, is an entirely different animal. He truly will get his no matter who the defender is. Tatum is a true 3-level scorer capable of getting flammable in an instant, and he will pull Mobley out onto the perimeter, a place where he can more than hold his own, but the perimeter is Tatum's house, and Mobley will be but a guest in it. If Mobley is able to slow down Tatum, it could bode well for Cleveland. The question is, will it be enough? Number 2, Cavs bench versus Celtics bench. Now on the surface, it may not seem like the Boston Celtics get a ton of production from their bench as a whole. Their reserves rank 26th in scoring at 29.3 points per game. However, this is a very efficient bunch, folks. They rank 2nd in overall field goal percentage at 48.9%. They are 2nd in 3-point percentage, caning 39% of their 3-point looks, and above all, they hold the league's top mark in terms of net rating, boasting a pristine 3.8 in that regard. They run deep, but essentially their bench consists of Sam Hauser, a flat-out sniper who is knocking down 42.4% of his looks from 3-point distance, Peyton Pritchard, who just turned in his best season with an increased role and minutes, and the ageless Al Horford, who has now shot above 40% from 3-point distance in back-to-back seasons. But with Kristaps Porzingis out at the moment, Horford has been pressed into the starting lineup, a place in which he is very comfortable. In his place is Luke Cornett, who has been valuable in limited minutes as well. Cleveland, conversely, is getting next to nothing from their bench at the moment. Through 7 playoff games, the reserves are averaging just 18.7 points per game, and even worse than that, they are shooting just 35.1% from the field and 26.2% from beyond the arc. Don't adjust your headphones, you heard that right. The leading reserve, Caris LeVert, is contributing just 7.4 points on a frigid 36.7% from the field, including 23.5% from 3-point range. Isaac Okoro has somehow been even worse offensively this postseason at times, and George Niang has been benched. This has opened the door for Marcus Morris Sr. to slide in, and he has made an impact in all of the games that he has played real minutes in. He played 26 huge minutes in Game 5 of the previous series and scored 12 points, then drew the start in Game 6 and provided some much needed physicality out there, grabbing 8 rebounds. There are no ifs, ands, or buts about it. They must get more production from the second unit if they hope to compete with Boston in a meaningful way. Number 3. Darius Garland versus Derek White. So much has been said about Darius Garland this season. Some people have constantly questioned his fit alongside Donovan Mitchell, others believe he's peaked already and that the 2021-22 version of Garland was the best that we will ever see, and then there are those that believe that he's just experiencing a rough season due to myriad injuries and confidence issues. With all of this in mind, if there was ever a time for Garland to show up and show out and do so consistently, it would be this matchup. Donovan Mitchell figures to see a large share of the defensive attention, and with that being the case, Garland may be called upon to perform at a higher level than we have seen him at all season long. The former All-Star is still very capable, he just has to play confidently, and how ironic is it that they will need him to step up against the very team that handed him that debilitating broken jaw that caused him to miss a significant portion of the season. He hasn't exactly gotten off to the greatest start this postseason, putting up averages of 14.9 points, 3.9 boards, and 5.4 assists. But the good news is that while getting off to that slow start, Garland has started to show signs of that all-star caliber player that we had seen in back-to-back seasons prior to the beginning of this one. It started in Game 5, in which he used a 17-point first quarter to help propel the Cavaliers past the Magic in a decisive victory that put Cleveland in a position to end the series in 6 games. And while that didn't happen, that performance carried over into Game 6 that would see him put up 21 points, 5 assists, and pull down 7 rebounds. He is trending in the right direction once more, and though he would score just 12 points and dish out just 4 assists in Game 7, Darius made some key plays down the stretch to help cement Cleveland's series-sealing victory. Enter Derrick White, a 7-year NBA vet who is coming off maybe the single best individual season of his career, putting up 15.2 points, 4.2 rebounds, and 5.2 assists while completing over 46.1% of his field goals, including 39.6% from 3-point distance. He has upped his level of play since the postseason began, arguably looking like Boston's best player in their first-round matchup with the Miami Heat, where he became the first Celtic in at least 25 years to score 15 points in back-to-back first quarters. The veteran guard is averaging 22.4 points while completing a staggering 47.7% of his 3-point attempts. Simply put, the man is hooping. These are two very good players, each with their strengths and weaknesses. That much is clear. Both are capable scorers. This matchup, however, will essentially boil down to their work on the other end of the floor, in my opinion. Specifically, Darius Garland's ability to shake Derrick White. White is coming off another spectacular regular season on the defensive end that will likely see him garner his second straight all-defensive nod. His 1.4 blocks were second most in the NBA among guards and the most for a player under 6'7". Over the course of the 3 regular season matchups, White spent the most time defending Garland and held him to 3 of 12. This one will be one to watch. X factors for Cleveland. When breaking this series down, there are a handful of possible X factors that could play a huge role in determining the victor of this series. Let's start with Isaac Okoro. Isaac Okoro is no stranger to these types of conversations, and he won't be this time around. The Boston Celtics are an offensive juggernaut with multiple 20 points per game scores to have to try and deal with. And by virtue of this, Isaac Okoro will yet again be an X factor for this series. We know the tale of the tape. After being pulled from the starting lineup in last year's playoffs, Okoro has responded with his best season yet. He attacked the rim more, as evidenced by his drives per game essentially doubling, going from 1.8 to 3.8. He is still providing all defensive level defense on the other end, and perhaps most importantly, he shot the ball more frequently, with more confidence than ever, and has just experienced his most efficient year yet in that regard, caning 39.1% of his triples on 3.1 attempts per game. The problem is, Okoro has been an offensive no-show at times during the 2023-24 playoffs. The Auburn product is averaging just 4.9 points and completing a frigid 35.3% of his shots, including 23.5% from 3-point distance. He has actually seen the court for about 6 more minutes per game than he did last postseason and attempting slightly more shots. He has been a ghost out there on the offensive end. And even worse, his confidence looks shot at times, as he has passed up a few shots when given a solid amount of space to pull the trigger. That simply cannot happen moving forward in order for his minutes to be justified. And make no mistake, everyone with the exception of DG has struggled to shoot the ball. The difference is, Okoro is the only one afraid to shoot at times. He'll be in JB Bickerstaff's initial rotation against Boston, no doubt, but for how long and for how many minutes is still very much going to be tied to how much damage he can do on the offensive end, more specifically his ability to space the floor. Boston will undoubtedly give him space. He must make them pay for doing so. Caris LeVert. Caris LeVert struggled in round 1. There is no other way to put it. He turned in some rough minutes. The low point was Game 6, in which he saw the floor for a series low 7 minutes and put up a measly 1 point. It didn't get any worse than this.
Themselves to get out into the break. First free throws of the night for Cleveland, and
he attempted just 1 shot. In fact, LeVert didn't play at all in the second half of that game. He can be effective in other areas, as evidenced by his 2 steals, 1 block, and 2 rebounds, but sometimes that just isn't enough to keep him on the floor. I continue to echo the sentiment. When he has it going, he can be a catalyst for this Cavs team. He is capable of being a 3-level scorer, and his ability to make plays for others, whether it be off of driving kicks, dump-offs, or lobs at the rim, can be a real asset at times, especially in lineups without one of Darius Garland or Donovan Mitchell on the floor. He is also capable of being a two-way player for stretches, and generally, when he has it going from an offensive standpoint, the defensive effort seems to be better. However, when he is off, much like he was for much of round 1, he is truly off. When he struggles with the shot, whether that be at the rim, from the mid-range, or 3-point range, it can truly leave the Cavs in a rough position. He is their only real creator off the bench. The Cavs are going to need Caris LeVert to step up in a consistent manner in order to win this series. It was something that the Cavs could work through against Orlando, but they won't be able to against an elite Boston Celtics team. He cannot disappear. Now the good news is that Caris closed out the first round with a big time showing in a Game 7 that saw him put up 15 points, 5 rebounds, 4 assists, and 1 block while going 5 of 9 from the field. Here's to hoping that carries over into round 2. Max Strus. I absolutely love the Max Strus addition this past offseason. It checked numerous boxes for the Cavs. And don't get me wrong, that move has already paid dividends as Strus has shown to be much more than your typical volume shooter. He can handle the rock, function as an emergency point guard. He is probably the Cavs' best rebounding option they can roll out at the 3, and he plays hard on the opposite end of the floor. All of this in addition to providing the starting unit with a solid amount of gravity as a shooter. He may have shot just 35.1% of his 3-point attempts this season, but make no mistake, opposing teams must respect his ability to knock down those shots. The problem is, Strus has mostly struggled to get his shots to drop thus far. Through 7 games this postseason, he is canning just 31.6% of his triples on roughly 5.4 attempts per game. It's been rough. This lack of success from range has led to Strus averaging below double figures in the playoffs for the 2nd straight year. Gravity doesn't mean nearly as much if your team isn't able to capitalize off of it by virtue of you failing to knock down those shots. The good news is that over his last 3 games, he has started to turn things around. He has gone 9 of 21 from beyond the arc over that stretch. The Cavs need their big offseason acquisition to show up consistently. He was brought in for exactly this time of year. Strus brings a lot to the proverbial table. However, at the bare minimum, he has got to knock down shots in order to open the floor for Cleveland's drivers. That will be of the utmost importance in this matchup as Boston features strong defenders at both guard spots. Marcus Morris Sr. After essentially riding the pine for the first 4 games of the first round series against the Orlando Magic, Marcus Morris Sr. has become a very important piece within JB Bickerstaff's playoff rotation, especially without the services of Dean Wade for now. He adds toughness to a team that clearly needed it going into the 2023-24 offseason and has had moments where they still are searching for it this season. He adds a true to size 4 who can space the floor. Honestly, the way I see it, Marcus Morris kind of brings to the table some of what both Georges Niang and Dean Wade do in my opinion. He is a very capable defender in the way that Wade is, and he adds toughness and volume shooting much the same way Niang is capable of doing. Morris will be a must play in my opinion against this Celtics team, mostly because of his ability to defend at a higher level than that of Niang. I do not want to see Niang trying to defend the likes of Jason Tatum. I just don't. And I don't think the Cavaliers will want to put him in that type of spot either, in my opinion. Very similar to Evan Mobley, Morris hasn't actually spent a lot of time this season operating as Tatum's primary defender, but over the course of their respective careers, Morris has actually held Tatum to a collective 5 of 20. That's 25%. That's pretty damn good. So with that being the case, I think Marcus Morris will be an X factor for this series.
Overall, this series is either going to be competitive due to Cleveland's pesky defense and pure determination to stave off the offseason and all of its potential questions and possible changes, or it will be a one-sided bloodbath due to Cleveland's inability to keep up offensively. I think the role players will also play a much bigger role in this series than the last. Isaac Okoro and his ability to shut down a team's top perimeter option comes to mind the most, and although he struggled to knock down shots against Orlando, Niang could certainly still play his role if he can knock down some trays. Time will tell. Go Cavs.